Now, our next speaker this morning is CTO of an infrastructure as a service provider, Softlayer. He's here to tell us about the importance of a flexible platform. Can you all welcome Marc Jones, please?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out this morning. Incredibly excited to be here this morning. I've spent the last, say, 2 weeks to a month at work and just feeling like I've been almost berated by my colleagues for getting to attend Web Summit and to get to present here. So I'm excited to kick things off this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about cloud. I want to focus on enterprise and some of the trends that we're seeing in this space right now. So I'm the CTO at Softlayer, global cloud infrastructure as a service provider. A little over a year ago, we were acquired by IBM. And so today we refer to ourselves as Softlayer, an IBM company. And the importance of this is that IBM has brought enterprise to the cloud. Previous to the acquisition, largely focused on the internet-centric SMB, startups, web-based companies, born-on-the-web companies. And in the past year, we've seen tremendous growth in the enterprise. True enterprise IT adopting cloud. One of the things that we talk a lot about is, I tend to call it cloud singularity, but it's this notion that there's one cloud, that there's one cloud provider, and that there's one solution, cloud, that's going to solve all problems. And the reality is that cloud is a collection of services. There are many providers in this space, and cloud has really grown to encompass more than just what we traditionally thought of as the infrastructure as a service provider, really as that source of cloud services. It's grown from IaaS to PaaS, so platform as a service, and SaaS. And today, really, there's so many companies producing software delivered as a service that when you look at it in its entirety, this is really kind of what the cloud ecosystem looks like. And it's really important to understand that it's more than just the traditional compute, storage, and network. So when we talk about enterprises, next thing we talk about is typically the deployment model. And enterprises historically largely deployed on-prem within their own data centers, or in colo facilities where they had their own servers running in cages of their own environments. And then cloud came into the picture. And enterprise is now starting to adopt cloud and move to the cloud. And what it's created is this new deployment model that really encompasses all three of these. Enterprises moving to the cloud, moving new workloads to the cloud, leaving existing workloads in their own data centers or in colos. But the important thing now is that they're all integrated. Most enterprises now are getting direct network connections between all of these environments to deliver fully integrated solutions and giving them complete flexibility as to when they would move to the cloud, if they ever would move to the cloud for all of their workloads, but giving really complete control over how they deploy their services. There's been a lot of talk, you read a lot about cloud as a commodity, and that it's a race to the bottom, and that cloud will ultimately become, extremely cheap, and that commodity that powers everything. And the reality is that a lot of cloud is becoming commodity today. If you look at raw compute, if you look at storage, but the reality is that it won't become complete commodity. There's going to be differentiation that occurs across providers, and that will power kind of the next generation of cloud. And when we look at, just broadly look at other industries, it's pretty evident that commodities exist, but it supports a full ecosystem, a full range of products and services. PC industry, obviously at the high end, we have the iMac. Operating system for the longest time, Windows was kind of at the top of that industry. And then Linux came along. Linux starts off free, open source. Now we have many distributions of Linux that are commercially backed and commercially supported. Mobile phones, obviously, iPhone being the top of it, continuing to push the high end of mobile phones, and people line up days in advance to get the latest versions. Headphones. Used to be one or two players in the space that were high-end. Beats came out, and now it's an entire industry at the very high end. And the automobile industry, kind of the biggest one of these, where, you know, cars from the low end to the high end, and we see most developments, most new activity occurring in that mid to high end. So when we start talking about cloud with the enterprise, it typically comes up about disruption, this massive change that's happened within the industry. And enterprise is typically late to the game. And disruption has occurred around them. Disruption has occurred and been embraced by startups, by tech-savvy entrepreneurs that recognize when there's an opportunity and they seize it. But with the enterprises now, what we're seeing, probably for the past, I would say, 4 to 6 years, large enterprise adoption has occurred from the lines of business, wanting to drive change, wanting to impact change in their business and not be blocked by IT. So they went around IT. They went directly to the cloud themselves. And they focused on a lot of the key mantras. I think Adrian touched on a couple of them this morning. But it's innovation, it's agility, it's flexibility. How do I move faster as an enterprise to be able to compete not only with my competitors that exist in my industry today, but how do I compete with a startup that may come out of nowhere, blindside me, and directly impact not just me, but the entire industry? So we see more of that happening now, and we see it's not just the lines of business. We see core IT coming to us. We have more briefings every week in our headquarters now for large enterprises wanting to learn about cloud and figure out how they come to cloud. And what's interesting is one of the first things they want to do is actually get a tour of our data center. And you know, our typical response back to that is, it's cloud, you don't need to worry about it. You know, we have all of this, here's our product portfolio. But they want to be able to walk through, they want to see it, they can't touch it, but they want to. So this is a shot of our data center, we start with that. But when we talk to them about our platform, we talk to them about cloud, particularly when we have the enterprises that have embraced it, these are the three main subject areas that they really latch on to. Choice, largely because if you looked at it from a catalog or a menu standpoint, they have so many more options available when they go to cloud. Typical IT can be fairly restrictive, and when you look at cloud providers, again, from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, you have so many options to build out your solutions that meet the needs of your enterprise or your business. Performance. Once they get to the cloud and they start to build these large solutions and their users come to it, they tend to want to focus on performance. And what we found is it's not just about peak performance. So peak performance meaning, I want to be as fast as I can possibly be for a service or a transaction. And that's really peak performance. But then when you talk about consistent performance, that becomes even more important. So when you move to the cloud, particularly a public virtualized cloud, multi-tenant cloud, your performance can be spiky, and through no fault of your own. It's just the nature of cloud. So understanding the capabilities to not only have peak performance, but consistent performance, because you have highs and lows. And each of those lows, each of those highs is experienced by a user of yours. And so that performance directly impacts customer experience and user experience. And then control. Figuring out that I have the ability to control my environments the way that I do in my own data centers. I have the ability to fully manage my servers, control security, control access. So we talk about workloads in the cloud. Enterprises have come, born on the web companies have come, and it really becomes a discussion then about workloads. How am I using cloud, and how am I expanding my enterprise or my business by leveraging the cloud? And the first one, I'm sure that's no surprise to y'all, is big data. This is probably our largest driver of cloud today. And it's partly driven because companies are generating, collecting, storing, and analyzing more data than ever before, and it's happening on the cloud. And they're leveraging these big data solutions to make that happen. And not just the latest generation of NoSQL or true big data solutions, but also very large implementations of traditional SQL data stores. And one of the things that we found is that they leverage bare metal for that. So one of our differentiators is bare metal. Again, back to the raw performance and consistent performance. Big data solutions end up on bare metal. And when I look at our largest customers, top 25, top 50, even top 100, every single one of them is using big data in some sort of their business. It's either the core of their business or it's powering their business. Scale out services. The notion of having web-based services, whether it's directly integrated with applications or exposing APIs. Being able to fully scale out at a moment's notice. When we talk to enterprises, we talk about the difference between internet scale and enterprise scale. Internet scale being you don't know who your customers are, you don't know how many there are, you don't know when they're going to hit, and you don't know how they're going to abuse your platform. And so to be ready for that, to build out truly internet scale. Enterprises, you typically know who your customers are, you know when they use your services and how they're going to use your services. And then the latest, I'd say, rage in the industry, IoT, Internet of Things. Really the notion of the connected world, the connected device. Every device that is a smart device is reporting data back, and that data has to go back somewhere. And most of these companies that are building these devices are building it to go back to the cloud and leverage cloud. But when we start looking at the future, and I touched earlier on the notion of commodity and that there's this race to the bottom and that the cloud is going to become software-defined everything, right? Software-defined networking, software-defined storage, software-defined data center. And the reality is when we start talking about differentiation for the future, hardware still comes into play. Hardware tends to not be talked about very much, but the reality is that when we start looking at the future of hardware and a true software overlay with that hardware, we can come up with differentiated solutions. So one of the ones that we have in play today already would be GPUs. So GPUs widely used in the cloud to help accelerate mathematical operations. GPUs typically started out obviously for graphic rendering, widely used now for more intensive floating point math operations. But when we start to look to the future, the work that Intel has done to be able to embed FPGAs directly into their CPUs using their QPI technology, there's Quick Path Interconnect. What that is the ability to take silicon and effectively embed it, so chips embedded within the CPU, fast interconnects. And then you're able to program these FPGAs and embed your code, embed your algorithms in there to get better performance. Power. Being from IBM, I have to talk about power. But power is moving to the cloud today. It's in the data centers. It's in our data centers. It's powering Watson in our data centers today. But with Power 8, they introduced a concept called CAPI. It's Coherent Acceleration Processor Interconnect. And it's very similar to what I talked about with Intel. This is basically an overlay of PCI Express 3 that gives very low latency, high throughput interconnect to the CPU. And allows you to have very fast connections to GPUs and FPGAs and DSPs. And then we have open power and we have open compute. So, rapid open collaboration in the hardware space. So there's definitely a place for hardware-based differentiation with software overlays in the cloud, and we think that this will come to bear in the next few years. Beyond that, the notion of data as a center of gravity. As I mentioned, data is being generated more than ever, and all that data has to be stored somewhere. It's being stored in the cloud. The more data that we have stored in the cloud, the more applications and services that are being built around that data. And the connected world. As Adrian mentioned in his talk, the enterprises really are looking for more locality. The cloud started off with a few regional data centers or zones. It's expanding globally. And a large part of that is data sovereignty, having that data locality within country borders. It's one of the reasons that we're expanding so rapidly at Softlayer. But it's also the notion of a connected data center. The network becomes key as we start to move more and more data centers into countries. That ability to have a connected world, a connected data center that you can rely on to build your solutions. And then the connected cloud. So that earlier slide, I showed all the clouds that really represent the ecosystem today. This is the end goal for the enterprise, to have it all connected, to have it all work together seamlessly. And a big driver of that is OpenStack. It is being evolved pretty rapidly, and it is a cornerstone for the open cloud going forward. So the next generation cloud is being built today. It's being built in large part now for the enterprise. If you can peel away and look inside, you see a lot of incredibly smart people, a lot of resources focused on building this next generation of cloud. And the most important piece of feedback I can give you is to be vocal, to talk to your providers, talk to your software companies, let them know what you want and what you need, because you're driving this next generation of the cloud. Thank you very much. Have a great conference.